Ralsei and ERAM are siblings. And I want to make myself clear, they aren't siblings literally or physically. The Darkners are related to each other in the same sense that Azrael and Kris are related to each other. But it seems like Ralsei is the black sheep of the family. Hello again, people, and welcome back to... I am working on the Ralsei video right now, and I am not experiencing writer's block, but I need to release something for the month of September, and I doubt I'll be able to get the Ralsei video done before the month is over. So today, we're talking about Ralsei and his family of darkness. I'll be the first to admit that this theory is crazy. After you're done watching this, you're either going to think I'm an absolute genius, or I have lost my mind completely. I fear I may have cooked, or I am cooked. Maybe I'm wrong, and this won't be an incredibly divisive video, but either way, I have a lot to prove in regards to this theory, so let's get started. We have a pretty good idea of what a darkener is at this point. When a dark fountain is opened, certain objects near it transform and are given life. When they come into existence, they have past memories, and a personality sometimes based on the world they are from. Darkners can also possess information about the surrounding light world, albeit limited information. For example, in Chapter 2, Ralsei is able to give Kris specific instructions on how to get to the old classroom, despite never going to school there. And Queen and Ram were able to see the creation of their own dark worlds respectively. The limitation of this information is supposedly based on what the Darkner can see, as in things that happen in the proximity of that object. Kris was not hiding their face, so Ram was able to discern it was they who opened up the Chapter 3 Dark World, while Queen could only guess what the Knight's intentions were, and she had no idea who they were because the Knight's face was obscured. Darkners do have knowledge of the light world, but they are far from experts. Ralsei was able to know that it was Susie who opened up the second Sanctuary Dark World, something that is unfortunately brushed over immediately. In my Susie video, I made it a point to say that he could have been watching them, but it wasn't entirely possible to do that. I said this because when the Dark World was sealed, Ralsei would have had to go back to Castletown, and there's no way he could have perceived Kris and Susie open up the fountain. Right? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. We know that Darkners exist solely in the Dark World, and if they ever leave, they will revert back into their object of origin. The only way a Darkner can be transported from one world to another is if a Lightner or some other mechanism moves them in between, or if a doorway is opened into another room, allowing the darkness to leak out. However, if they stay away from their original world for too long, they turn to stone. These are the basic rules a Darkner has to follow. Then there's Ralsei, a maverick, a bad boy, if you will. This cutie patootie doesn't play by the rules. Before the release of the new chapters, Ralsei was the only Darkner that didn't turn to stone outside of his original Dark World. Now, with the likes of Friend and ERAM, we see there are other instances of Darkners breaking these rules. Let's go over all of the things that both ERAM and Ralsei have in common. Ralsei has information regarding the outside world, even more so than Tenna or Queen did. Ralsei and ERAM's knowledge extends further beyond what is known to be possible. Not just the knowledge of places or people in the light world, but also events they were not there to see. In Chapter 3, should you force Noelle to cast Snowgrave, ERAM will taunt Kris before their fight, letting us know that they have knowledge of what we did to Noelle in the Weird Route. ERAM has knowledge of Chapter 2's Dark World, so either they were able to see it, or they were able to travel to that Dark World to witness it. While not turning to stone, might I add, ERAM also mentions how it wasn't really Kris, as if they are aware of our presence. This one line isn't really enough to say that they are aware of the player's presence, but if they did, this would be pretty high up on the characters knowing things they shouldn't know scale. The two Darkners know things, either because they both have the ability to perceive events from inside the Dark World without leaving, or they were watching from the Dark World and just have the ability to move in between without being seen. One might think that these two could not be related based on their appearances being so different. While yes, they don't share in appearance, they absolutely share in characteristics. ERAM appears as an amorphous blob, almost formless. Ralsei, despite having a decided form, can also appear to be formless at certain moments. Whenever he's downed in battle, he appears to vanish altogether, almost as if his physical form is only possible because he's conscious. If he is ever knocked unconscious, his form will waver, disappearing altogether. On top of that, his form changes from Chapter 1 after he removes his hat. Now just wait, okay? Because I know exactly what you're going to say. His face was just obscured by his hat, dummy. You dumb bird idiot. First of all, that was a little harsh. Secondly, as it turns out, Ralsei's hat has absolutely no bearing on his appearance. He is not impeded at all by the fact that he's trying to cover his face. What I mean is that he moves normally. His sleeves and his cloak are all pushed up by his magic when he's using his spells. Like he's not at all worried that his hat might fly off and people might see his actual face. Also, there is this sprite of Ralsei using an item where he takes his hat off and his face remains black. And honestly, this would be the perfect piece of evidence to support the fact that the hat has nothing to do with his appearance, but as far as I know, the sprite went unused. Okay, so I literally just tested it right after I wrote that sentence, and it is in the game. What? For the longest time, I thought that that sprite wasn't used. Chapter 1 is so easy compared to everything else. I have never needed to use an item, so I just sell everything except the top cake. If Ralsei uses an item in Chapter 1, he takes his hat off in battle and he's still covered in darkness? Okay, so yeah, like I was saying the whole time, the hat didn't really matter. It didn't matter if Ralsei was wearing the hat or not. His appearance was still covered by darkness, and he can supposedly control his scarf like it's an extra appendage. There are aspects of his appearance that he has control of, and his hat never really mattered. Now, obviously, this isn't on the same scale. ERAM is straight up flubber shooting fireballs and whatnot. The sheer ability to cloak yourself in darkness is very different than what ERAM is pulling off in this fight. While we're on the subject, ERAM seems to be pretty adept at fire magic, which is pretty unique. You know, come to think of it, I don't think we've seen any other Darkner use fire magic. Huh, okay, well dang, I guess it runs in the family. And finally, just look at ERAM's design. Those are almost certainly horns. They have similar characteristics. Ralsei can use darkness to hide or even change his form. They both have knowledge of the outside world as well as what happens in other dark worlds. These are all pretty big similarities. So why does this even matter? Where am I going with all this? What would it matter if these two were related? And what does Friend have to do with any of this? This entire conversation may be the final piece of information we need to finally understand what Ralsei is. So many theories surround what real-world object is Ralsei. Is he the red horns Kris used to wear? Is he Kris's knife? Is he Azriel's dust? Is he Kris's dream persona? An imagined version of what Kris wanted to be? Maybe, but we'll get back to that. So many ideas, and yet no concrete answer. I am almost certain we will get our answer in Chapter 5, so this may be our last chance to figure it out beforehand. Also, just having this revelation could give us insight into Ralsei's backstory, while explaining why he can do the things that he do. To understand Ralsei, I think we need to first understand the nature of the Dark World itself. To put it plainly, the Dark World is another level of existence, a lesser level in Ralsei's eyes. Taking an item from one world to another changes the way you perceive it, as well as how that specific thing operates. Therefore, the Dark World itself can be considered another realm of existence. We could get more in-depth with things like hierarchy, but that's not that important. The Dark Worlds exist, whether or not a Dark Fountain is open. The fountain is just a nexus, or a means of connecting the two worlds together. The essence of the Dark World leaks into the light via these dark fountains. So, what happens when a fountain is closed and you are on the other side? Well, as we've seen, nothing really happens. You just go back to the light world. Because, technically, you're not actually going to the Dark World. You see, the area of the light world is being changed by the dark. The area you are in is still the same, it just appears to be bigger and warped because of the darkness, making everything more indistinct. Going off this interpretation, Ralsei's explanation of the Titan makes a lot more sense. Before you fight the Titan, Susie says we just have to wait until it gets here, but Ralsei corrects her. It was here the entire time, waiting for them, perhaps even watching them, eagerly anticipating the moment it can be released. The Titan itself appears to be a being of no consciousness and no morals. It doesn't even speak, it only wants to destroy. As it has become an established understanding, Lightners can use determination, a source of power derived from someone's will. This is what allows them to make dark fountains in the first place. This is what allows them to create fiction on an unbelievably large scale. This Darkner in Chapter 4, while cryptic, explains why every dark world is different. The lighting of the mind, the person shining their light on the dark world, giving form to the formless. This is kind of what we do as people, isn't it? We can take a blank canvas and paint something unique. A Lightner can create, but the Titan can only destroy, and it supposedly has always been there. This is why I believe that the dark world exists, whether or not a fountain is open. A fountain simply brings that indistinct darkness into the light world, changing the surrounding area as a result. This could be how Ralsei was able to see Susie open up the second sanctuary dark world. Whether we could see him or not, Ralsei was watching them from the real dark world, from the one which the fountain flows. It's kind of touching, to be honest, to know that Ralsei is watching his friends whenever they're away, or at least he can watch them when they're far away. It also explains why he filled Chris's room with so many things he thought they would want. Like, a lot of people might have forgotten this, right? But Ralsei had to have seen Chris's room at one point. Otherwise, why would Ralsei make the assumption that Chris needed to have a bunch of trophies? Or that they would want a green crayon? Speaking of which, what is Ralsei's real-world object? If these two are Darkners, then surely they would have their own objects, right? What would ERAM be? A cloak? A black trash bag? The essence of darkness itself? Obviously, we don't know, but what if there is no object that ERAM is tied to? Seems to be impossible, but remember, these two don't play by the rules. What makes a Darkner? Why does a Darkner come into existence? Usually, they're born from a Lightner. Azrael and Chris would take a plug from the library and play with it like it was a regular toy. Thus, it became Ram. It wasn't just a plug anymore. It had purpose because they gave him that purpose. Ram didn't become a Darkner because he was a plug. He did so because the Dreamer siblings cared about him. Through their determination, they gave meaning to something that was initially intended to just be an appliance. They gave form to the formless. This entire time, we were under the impression that it was the object that was important, when, if anything, the intent of the creation was much more important. Think back to when Ram was turning to stone. He was almost frozen completely, but he was able to keep just his head from turning so he could give Chris one more game. He finally turns to stone because he no longer had a purpose in that world. It's the same reason the Zapper turned to stone. No more shows, no more need to change the channels. Same with Lancer. Lancer was given a job to test controllers, finally turning to stone after you defeat ERAM and the game turns off. He no longer had a purpose in that world, thus turning to stone. The important thing here is that it's not the object, but the purpose, the intent given to that Darkner, which they form from. We spent so much time theorizing about what object Ralsei could be, but what if he wasn't anything at all? Anything physical, of course. Now, on paper, it's really unsatisfying to say that ERAM and Ralsei are nothing, just beings of pure darkness. But like I said, the object doesn't matter, it's the intent behind it. So, if they don't have objects tied to them, what are they? I mean, you could just say they're just pure darkness, but like, what does that mean? What is their purpose? That is where friend comes into the mix. Have you ever been stuck on something for the longest time to the point where you just can't make heads or tails of it? And then someone comes along and says something and you're just like, ah, of course, that makes so much sense. Why didn't I get that sooner? That is exactly how I felt when someone posed this idea on the Discord. Ducky King 9999 posed the idea that friend was connected to Susie. While I can't say for sure they are, what they say next led me to a wave of awe and epiphany. Friend was also one of those wild cards that appeared in multiple Dark Worlds and even appears in the Dark World explanation cutscene, giving us their best Freddy Fazbear impression. Friend even appears in the fight with ERAM, annoyingly running away when you look at them. We see Friend for the first time in Chapter 2 should we decide to go along with Spamton's deal. Very briefly, we can see that Friend is watching us from the shadows. I say that Friend shows up in the ERAM fight, but as per video game rules, it more so appears that ERAM is summoning Friend to help in their fight, as well as there being multiple of them. From a video game boss fight standpoint, this is simply an ad phase, where the boss summons a bunch of smaller enemies to help them fight. You have to deal with these before you get back to the regular boss. Almost 100% of the time, the ads are going to be weaker than the actual boss itself. Understanding this, it's almost a 100% certainty that ERAM is stronger and commands Friend. And considering this fight confirms that there could be multiple friends, I am almost certain that this image in Chapter 2 is either ERAM themselves watching us, or ERAM sending Friend to watch us. That is, of course, assuming that Friend and ERAM are two separate entities. It's actually already been heavily theorized that ERAM and Friend are just the same person, and the thing that we know as image_friend is just an extension of ERAM's abilities. It would actually make a lot of sense. ERAM doesn't appear to have eyes themselves, so they would need another means of gathering information. Right before their fight, ERAM does say that they can see in the dark, even though they don't have any eyes. Whether or not ERAM and Friend are the exact same entity isn't that important. What is important is that they are the same type of entity. As far as I'm concerned, Friend can be lumped into the same boat that Ralsei and ERAM are. The name Friend feels a little inaccurate, considering they attack us. But then again, Friend doesn't necessarily mean they are our friend. They could be someone else's friend. My point is to highlight the name of Friend. What kind of friend are they? Whose friend are they?
Friend inside me.
No, sorry, not that kind of friend. Well, at least, I don't think so. To make a dark world is to create fiction, and to make anything requires some level of originality and creativity. And all of that requires a profound level of imagination. ERAM and Ralsei are imaginary friends, given purpose by the people they were imagined by, and given form by the dark worlds themselves. Think about it. Imaginary, meaning they have no physical object to bind them. No connection to the light world via an object means that they can move in between dark worlds at will. Ethereal by design, so they can travel through the darkness more fluidly. And they have no decided form, so they can just change how they look whenever they feel like it. They are imaginary, which means that the essence of what they are could come from base emotions or ideas. Like I said, the Dreamer siblings gave meaning to a flippin' power plug. That is a skip and a jump away from having an imaginary friend. When you add the dark world to something like that, something that lets you create fiction on a massive scale, you get these two. Now, of course, the question is, whose imaginary friends? Well, as basic as the assumption is, I'm pretty sure Ralsei is Kris's imaginary friend. They spent a good portion of their life in their brother's shadow. They wanted red horns so they could feel like they fit in. Perhaps they felt a sense of abandonment when Azrael left, so they imagined a version of their brother that couldn't leave. And there is no green crayon in their house, which could explain why Ralsei's clothes are green. I'll admit that last one wasn't the strongest argument, but this would explain everything. One of the reasons why I found this conclusion to be so compelling is because, in a way, everyone was right. Some people thought it was the horns, some say it was Kris's dreamer Sona, but with this conclusion, Ralsei would be an amalgamation of all of those things. Ralsei came straight out of Kris's imagination. Ralsei is more than just an object. He's a symbol, an idea, a representation of Kris's dreams, given a voice and a mind. Now, when we get to ERAM, the answer is not as concrete, but I am almost certain that they belong to Noelle. My only evidence supporting this comes from the Spamton sweepstakes. It is a story told by a very young Noelle, so young she can't spell very good. One time she was alone in a dark room with an ICE pizza box, and the mascot on the box winked at her. Naturally, she flipped out, and only December believed her. To calm her down, she made a show of destroying the box by burning out its eyes, and of course, what is the name of the song that plays during ERAM's boss fight? A long time ago, Noelle unknowingly made an imaginary friend, which scared her, thus leading December to burn out ERAM's eyes, which is why they were perfectly fine with us taking the Shadow Mantle, as it could be used to help us fight December. The scariest part about all of this, I have no idea how ERAM was able to manifest inside Noelle's kitchen of all places. Then again, she said it was dark, and she couldn't find the light switch. Maybe her kitchen was just broken? Now, I can't prove that Noelle fell into a dark world and her sister had to save her by beating ERAM, so for now, I'll just say that probably isn't how it went down. But if it ends up coming up in a flashback, I will absolutely be taking credit for that. And there you have it. That's my theory. Ralsei and ERAM, for that matter, are darkners born from the imaginations of our Lightners, both potentially created by accident and given life thanks to the Dark Worlds. And while their forms are not physical, they are far from weak. They are siblings who grew up in very different circumstances. Ralsei was meant to be one of the 3 heroes from the prophecy, and ERAM was meant to get their eyes burned out. Ugh. Kinda feels unfair. No wonder they're trying to sow chaos. Like I said, I'll be the first to admit this theory is pretty high on the crazy meter, but, no one expected us to fight a Titan in Chapter 4, so, you know what? I think now's the time to get crazy. I doubt we have seen the last of ERAM, and that Darkner family reunion is about to be crazy. Until then, thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye. I would like to thank all of the Nighthawk channel members. Thank you Lilico, thank you Bleed4MBG, thank you Vantum253. Thank you so much.